How are you, brother?
I'm good. I'm, getting by.
Okay, so were you in flight when Jokic and Mat Ishbia?
No, I was back. Okay, I got back early on Sunday, so I got to watch the Celtics and the Sixers, and then whatever happened in Denver with Jokic and Ishbia. Wild. I'm just waiting to see what the NBA rules on this. It'll probably come later today, how they decide to adjudicate all this, because there's a couple of different ways you can go. Number one, you have to look at Jokic and put aside the fact that it was Mat Ishbia. 99 times out of 100, if you see a player interact with a fan in the way Jokic did, some kind of suspension is coming. Now, there were mitigating circumstances. You had Mat Ishbia seem to make contact first. It was Mat Ishbia, the owner of the Suns, who kind of held onto the ball a little bit too long.
Not kind of. He flat out, like I was saying at the top of the show, like if he was back on the Spartan bench, the possession arrow would have been pointing in the direction of the Suns.
But I can tell you this, and this go back a little bit further to zoom out a bit. Mm-hmm. When Draymond Green got suspended, most of it was because of the stomp that he did to Domas Sabonis. But part of it was how he incited the crowd afterwards. That was taken into account when the NBA made its decision. Adam Silver was sitting right there in Sacramento watching the whole thing, and Draymond was shouting at the crowd, interacting with the crowd. The biggest fear in the league office is a repeat of the Malice in the Palace.
Get it.
Like, that is on the mind of everyone over there when you have crowd interaction. So the fact that Jokic elbowed someone, putting aside that it's Ishbia, the fact that he elbowed someone in the crowd, I think there's going to be a lot of conversation today in Olympic Tower in New York about how to punish him. My gut is fine, something like nothing that takes Jokic out of the game.
They can't.
But this is going to be a tough call, Rich. I'm telling you, it's going to be a very tough one.
And I understand that for he even admitted it was a fan, like he didn't know it was the Suns owner, governor, and so it doesn't matter. Just the whole concept is that somebody in street clothes was there and received an elbow from him. And you can't make contact with that. But his point is right. Like, Ishbia's right hand was on his small of his back, and then he held on to the basketball, which is something
still not reason.
But he's trying to get the game going again. He's situationally in the moment of the game where he's going to grab the ball from the fan, hand it to the official, and see if he can get a 5-on-4 break going here. And instead,
I get his argument. I understand what he's trying to say. Even if he had grabbed the ball, the referee still has to hold it, and the referee's not restarting play until Josh Okogie is like functional and away from the crowd. So it wouldn't have been a 5-on-4 break. I thought it would have been more explainable if there was a Nuggets player that had fallen to the crowd. If Jokic is going in there trying to protect his teammate, I think that would have worked more in his favor. But the fact that he just wanted to get the possession going again, and as part of that, he elbowed someone in the crowd, it's just not a good look. It's not a good look for Nikola Jokic. And I'm telling you, there are going to be people inside the league office that are pro-suspension when they have this discussion.
Suspension would be
Game 5 in a series this close where they've needed him. Wow.
I'll be honest. Suspension would be unacceptable. That's the
Frankly,
way
I thought
and I understand, and I totally understand. Look, I've been an NFL employee for 20 years, so I understand the way a league and league management looks at things when it involves a fan or the NFL doesn't have fan contact issues pretty much because fans are in the stands. This is a sport where there are fans who are truly one step away from having somebody sitting in their lap. I totally understand the Malice in the Palace. I get it. You cannot suspend Jokic, and I understand that he made contact with a fan. Fine him if you want, but then my question is what do they do about Ishbia? He can't hold on to the basketball like he owns it. Like, come on. And I know he's new to the league, but he's not new to basketball.
Let me ask you this. Would a suspension for Nikola Jokic be more outrageous to you than the suspension to Draymond Green?
1,000,000%.
I'm not sure it would be that much more outrageous.
Why?
Because he elbowed someone in the crowd. And let's say that wasn't Mat Ishbia. Let's say that's a intoxicated fan of the Phoenix Suns who takes an elbow and comes back and throws a haymaker at Nikola Jokic. The fact that it didn't lead to a uglier incident, I don't think that makes it any better. I actually would be less outraged by a Jokic suspension than I was over Draymond. I came out right away and said a suspension is outrageous. Sabonis grabbed his leg.
Yes.
Draymond stomped on him, kind of like it wasn't. I thought Grant Williams got stomped on a lot worse by Joel Embiid. But I think a Jokic suspension to me would be less outrageous than what happened to Draymond.
Really?
Yes.
Even though he touched Jokic first?
But let's be clear on touching him. He didn't shove Jokic, right? Like, put his hand on him a little bit, shouldn't have held onto the basketball. He didn't initiate an altercation with Jokic. I know, look, we're dissecting this a day after, and we're not in agreement on how it all played out. This happened split second, right? And Jokic just responded, threw a bit of an elbow there. I think Jokic overreacted in that moment. I do.
Well, I think we can all be in an agreement that what Ishbia tweeted out on Monday morning.
He had to tweet that.
No, I know he had to tweet it, but him saying, like, there's nothing to see here, this shouldn't be a story. Man, I'm sorry. I mean, he held onto a basketball in the middle of a heated moment, and, he did receive an elbow to his upper chest or his neck area.
Flopped a little bit afterwards.
Well, I mean, and that also, TJ and I were talking about that too, that if you ever have like just to defend the moment here, if you ever have like a folding chair seat right behind the back of your knees, you can easily lose your balance. Right. And I've never been shoved by somebody of Jokic's size. But that said, what adds to the moment is that if you do believe he flopped, it made it seem like the owner was trying to sell the moment to the officials to maybe get something, either the tech or something worse on Jokic in the moment.
Well, he was, because it wasn't just the fall. He threw his hands up in the air right afterwards in kind of a Draymond exaggeration.
So
moment.
A governor of the NBA should not be doing that.
No.
So don't you think a fine or something should be coming in his direction?
Absolutely.
As well?
And Mat Ishbia, if he does get fined, would pull that out of the seat cushions of his office. The bigger question coming into this is, does the NBA allow Nikola Jokic to elbow someone in the crowd?
No, I would understand why a fine would come. It's just, come on, suspending him for game 5, like this is.
I hope I'm wrong.
Really, the pivotal game 5, because game 5s are either decisive or pivotal. This is pivotal.
This is going to be. You remember how the Draymond announcement came out? I think it was late Friday evening. Now, normally these announcements come out afternoon, like during business hours in the league office, because there's unanimity oftentimes on how things get adjudicated. This could be the same type of situation where whatever punishment is announced, whether it's a fine, upgraded to a flagrant foul, another technical attitude, whatever they decide to do, I could see this happening later in the day on Monday, because I think there will be a lot of discussion in the league office about how to handle this.
Chris Mannix here on the Rich Eisen Show. Let's move on to the game tonight, where I'm assuming you will be there tonight. And you called Lakers winning the West a while ago. Is this what you had in mind, pretty much?
Well, I think I had in mind that their defense is really good, and the numbers back that up ever since they made all the trades they made before the trade deadline. I saw Anthony Davis being dominant all through March, and I said, look, this is the old Anthony Davis. I understand we have to be wary about Anthony Davis getting injured at different times, but when I wrote what I wrote back in March, I'd seen him play through hard falls, bad ankle sprains, obviously dealing with the foot injury that had been lingering for him. So I believe that was transferable. And then it comes down to LeBron. Like, how many times do we bet against LeBron and he finds a way to come through? And the Lakers get to the free throw line an awful lot. That was true in the regular season. It's been true in the playoffs. Davis has been great. The role players are a lot better. Didn't expect D'Angelo Russell to be as good in some pivotal games in this postseason, but he has been an upgrade for them. This is not an aberration with the Lakers. This is what they have been since late January, early February, when Davis returned and they shook up the roster. So I'm a believer in what the Lakers are.
Okay, and so the Warriors, I asked this question of Ramona Shelburne last week, and I'll ask it to you now. The deep dive that will inevitably come on this Warriors season, what will it reveal? What is the iceberg we're just seeing the tip of? You're already seeing Greg Anthony tweeted out last night that Jordan Poole's numbers are down, and he said, hey, anything happen that might have altered his mindset before the season? I mean, are we going to be talking about that punch once this thing's all over, do you think?
I think that we will be talking about how that incident in training camp affected the locker room during the season. But I think bigger picture for the Warriors, one of the things we'll be talking about is how their young players never really stepped into the bigger roles that Golden State expected. I mean, you look at the championship level runs that they've gone on. Mm-hmm. They've always had their core four, right? But they've also had Andre Iguodala playing a significant role, Gary Payton playing a significant role, Otto Porter last year, who I think he started one of those finals games, playing a significant role. The Warriors anticipated before the season that Moses Moody, Jonathan Kuminga, and before he was traded, James Wiseman, somebody from that collection of players would step up and be able to be playing right now in significant roles right now. That really hasn't happened. They have been overly reliant on their star players to play above and beyond what they're capable of. And look, and Steph has been great most of the time.
Yes.
Clay has had, his previous game was fantastic, but their margin for error got a lot smaller when Iguodala became unavailable, when they lost some of the other veterans that were on the roster. I think that is a bigger issue for this team right now than whatever dynamic exists with Jordan Poole. There will be a autopsy for Golden State after the season where they think, all right, if we do bring Draymond back, can we bring Draymond and Poole back into the mix? Do we have to think about trading Jordan Poole? To fix whatever locker room dynamic might exist, because you see, Rich, like you hear about what's going on in the locker room, but you also see what's happening on the floor. The Sacramento series, Game 6, where Jordan Poole kind of brushes off Draymond.
Yes.
The body language from some of these Warriors players when Jordan Poole takes these ill-advised shots. There's obviously fire where this smoke is. I think that's something that definitely will have to be addressed if this season goes sideways.
And a lot of folks thought maybe that was put to bed with the famed Curry post-Game 6 home loss speech. Get on the bus. You're with us. If not, stay off the bus to Sacramento. And, here we are now 3 games into this series, and we're wondering what's going to happen tonight. Who the heck knows? I get it. But there's no doubt whatever happened in the beginning of the season is still lingering, right? I mean, we can safely assume that?
I think now the situation has evolved over the season.
Yes.
I think whereas initially for a couple of months, Draymond lost his ability to speak in that locker room. Like he had to prove himself all over again to that team. But I think as the season has played out, I don't want to say the roles have reversed, but Draymond has certainly regained his place as a leader inside that locker room. And Jordan Poole, for whatever reasons, I think most of it's on court, like kind of his lack of production or lack of consistent production on court has diminished him somewhat in the eyes of his teammates. That can change tonight. Like he could have an efficient 7 for 11 type game and the Warriors could run away with it. It's happened before, but as far as long-term, that's definitely something I think will need to be addressed.
All right, Chris Mannix here on the Rich Eisen Show studios. I want to just jump in with what we talked about at the end of the first hour with Chris Brockman and the rest, giving voice to what so many NBA fans feel about Scott Foster. Is the NBA front office aware that fans view Scott Foster as not on the up and up in a way? And I'm not saying that he's on the take. I'm just saying that he does what the league wants to do to get the television audience, having a 7-game series and stuff like that. Are they aware of this?
They're aware of it. Whenever I speak to league officials about that perception, what often I'll get bombarded with are facts and figures, statistics that show, or at least a reference to statistics that show that Scott Foster is one of the most accurate referees that they have. And look, whether it's this Game 5 with Lakers Warriors or the NBA Finals, he's involved in a lot of games. Now, fans might say, well, he's involved because he'll do what the league says. And that perception is because of 2 things, right? One, his previous association with Tim Donaghy. You can't wash that away.
Yes.
They were friends before Donaghy was bounced from the league because of the gambling scandal, and the Chris Paul numbers. Like every time Scott Foster has officiated a Chris Paul game over the last few years, it's been pointed out time and again that Chris Paul can't win when Scott Foster's out there. So I think it's been, this 2 very high-profile connections that have enhanced this perception of Scott Foster. I think he's a good referee. Like, I would challenge people to kind of point to multiple specific moments where he gets the call wrong. Like, I don't think he gets it wrong, or it's not a word, but I don't think he gets it more wrong than other top referees do.
Does that help you, Chris?
No.
But isn't that true, though? Don't you always, when you think Scott Foster, like, what do you point to with how he screws it up?
It's kind of like the NFL, right? You call holding on every play. It's about tone early. Like, Anthony Davis is getting 2 fouls in the first quarter.
Okay,
right?
But then if he does, then I'll come back here next time and say you're right. But when you're saying that you're like, Scott Foster makes too many bad calls, I need to hear which ones you're talking about.
I'm not saying they're bad. You could call a foul on every drive to the hoop. You could call hand check on it. It's just tone.
Correct, but what?
How you're
all right,
calling the game.
tell me which. You got to point to a game. You got to point to a specific incident, because I think that you are doing what I just said people are doing, which is associating him, whether it's conscious or not, with Donaghy and with the Chris Paul stuff. You're
probably right, and I don't have any specifics. I'll watch the game tonight, maybe take some good notes and get back to you, but it's just a perception. And when referees,
well, he's not alone. You know that, right?
I get it, but again, I don't know if the perception. I don't know if the perception is connected to the reality of the situation. What the NBA likes about Scott Foster is that he controls the game. Like, it's sometimes look like the incident from last night. You need a crew chief there that's in control in that situation. Yeah. Someone with experience, someone that's been part of big games. Scott Foster is that guy. That's why part of the reason why they like him so much.
But perception is reality. You can't have referees
it's not always reality.
On Twitter. Like, that's just a bad look for the league.
Okay, if we're not gonna, you can't allow Twitter to dictate. Like, who?
NBA Twitter is a powerful force.
But I think
it
shouldn't be an influential one, though. You shouldn't be looking. If you're the league,
can't be happy that Foster is trending every time he's refereeing.
What are you going to do about it, though? Like, if you're Monty McCutcheon, who's the NBA referees are, like, if you're going to see Scott Foster trending on Twitter, he's also very recognizable. People know what Scott Foster looks like. You can't pick like Bill Kennedy out of a lineup. Most NBA referees. So I think that's part of it. But if you're Monty McCutcheon and you're like, all right, big game coming up, we're going to assign a certain referee. Oh, damn, Stevie7293 says Scott Foster sucks. Like, you cannot go by what Twitter tells you.
I can't believe you just called out your burner account, Chris.
Sorry, man.
This is Josiah, who has pretty big influence and worldwide wob in these guys. They're making reference to all these stats and how Scott Foster is.
I think he's
got a perception.
And that's why I ask if the league's aware. Does Monty McCutcheon dress like that all the time?
All the time.
Oh,
all the time.
On. Really?
All the time. I was in the NBA bubble with Monty for a while.
He's bow tied in the bubble. Bow tie.
Part of the time. Yeah. Like I saw the last game. Monty McCutcheon referee. I was texting people in the league office. Like, I can't take. Or Monty McCutcheon was doing some of the talk back.
Yes.
I'm like, I can't take Monty seriously when he's dressed like a leprechaun. Like, I can't. It's very difficult.
Yeah.
I love the guy. He's a great guy.
It is funny. Every single time he pops on, I didn't think about this. I was hankering for a bowl of Lucky Charms.
Yes.
Now I understand it. So is Scott Foster going to take Steve Javi's role? Right. Pretty much. One day, will he be? Will he be?
Those guys, again, I like Steve Javi. Known him a long time, but I need a independent referees rules analyst that is willing to go after his former colleagues.
You need a Mike Pereira.
A Mike Pereira. In the boxing world, I used to work with Steve Smoger, who was a great referee, passed away recently. And whenever we would go to Steve Smoger for something that happened in the ring, if the referee got it wrong, Steve Smoger would slap him around a little bit. I kind of want that. I never feel like I get that from Steve Javi. I don't feel like he ever
always backs the referees.
Yeah, I don't want that. You got to have some independence in that situation, a fearlessness that comes with going after your former colleagues.
I've got Chris Mannix of Sports Illustrated here on the Rich Eisen Show. What's your take on Celtics Sixers so far and what happens from here on out?
First of all, phenomenal game for James Harden. Like, I was among the people on Friday rather, jumping up and down on him for the way he played. I mean, because when he went in the tank for games 2 and game 3, it gave license to go after him for everything else he's done in the past. All those playoff flameouts in Houston, the couple of bad games he had in Oklahoma City in the postseason. Like, we were once again seeing James Harden wilt in those big moments. Everything did in game 1, inconsequential. Game 2 and 3, just in the tank. For him to come out and play like that and make shots like that, all credit in the world for him. I came into the series believing Boston was significantly better. The Celtics have owned the Sixers over the last couple of years, regular season, postseason. So James Harden playing like that was remarkable. Can James Harden keep it up? That to me is the biggest question. Embiid's going to be great. Like, I mean, people talk about him deserving MVP. Might deserve Defensive Player of the Year. He's such a dominant force in the paint. He's going to be great. I feel Maxi's going to be okay. I don't know what I'm going to get in James Harden in Game 5. I don't know which version of him is going to show up. He doesn't have to be the star of Games 1 and Game 4, but he can't be whatever that was in Game 2 and Game 3. That's the big question in the series. The Celtics, they've got great perimeter defenders. James Harden's got to be better. That, to me, is the big question going to Game 5.
So there's no variables on the Celtics side of things?
Because it's more about how their perimeter defense plays, right? They've been great. They were great in Game 2 and Game 3. And the strength of their defense is Jaylen Brown, who was great against Harden, and then the three guards, Derek White, Marcus Smart, Malcolm Brogdon. They should be able to make Harden, Maxey, DeAnthony Melton inefficient. They're that good. They can switch everything. They're that good. It's a battle of strengths in this series with the backcourt of the Sixers and the backcourt of the Celtics. Whoever comes out of that matchup, what's out of that battle with the win, I think wins the game in the series.
And what about the conference? How do you feel about that sense, having watched the Heat dispatch with the Bucks and then now be up 2-1 going into tonight's game against the Knicks? Do you get the sense that the best of three, if you will, that starts in Boston is going to determine the conference, or what do you got for me there?
Yeah, I think whoever wins the Celtics series the Celtics Sixers will be the favorite going into that round. I just can't figure Miami out. Like, I watched them all season long, and they just looked like something was missing. Whether it was personnel, attitude, whatever. It felt like something was off with that team. And then you watch the play-in game where Atlanta just goes down there and beats the daylights off them. You're like, all right, they're done. First round fodder for Milwaukee. But they just, starting with Jimmy Butler, they just raised their game, everyone, top to bottom, to another level in the postseason. I think they're a favorite against the Knicks tonight. We'll see. Can Julius Randle step up and have a monster game? Can Jalen Brunson play better than he's played in previous games? But I don't know. Miami's just really hard to figure out. Like Boston last year, they were a Jimmy Butler missed three-pointer, like a couple of inches from losing that series in 7. That's basically the same team down in Miami that they played once again. Maybe Tyler Hero finds his way back on the floor earlier rather than later. I think the Celtics or the Sixers beat the Knicks. I don't know what to make of Miami at this point.
So Miami could actually
go on this run here. They're a built-for-playoff team. We hear that it's a cliche in basketball and sports, plug and play, right? Plug and play player. Miami's proof of that. Like Duncan Robinson is in street clothes for most of the last 3 months.
Yes.
Tyler Hero goes out. Here comes Duncan Robinson back in, looking like the guy we saw in the bubble. Max Strus making shots, Gabe Vincent making shots. All these guys that anyone could have signed at any point in time. They come down to Miami, and all of a sudden they become better versions of themselves. Miami's just different. The way they do things is different.
We can't sit here and say that we don't get a bubble rematch in the finals.
You might.
That's entirely possible.
Yeah.
With fans and everything this time around. Give me a good Jimmy Butler story. You got one? I mean, because he is one of the most fascinating to me superstars that got, Bulls had him, and then the Sixers had a shot. Obviously, Minnesota had him. And he's dominant. He can be as dominant as any superstar in this league. And he's remarkable. The guy's remarkable. You got a good one for me?
I don't have a specific Jimmy Butler story. I heard Jeff Teague tell a good story recently about that famed practice in Minnesota where Jimmy Butler with the G League Timberwolves just kicked the crap out of the starters, ripped off his warm-up shirt to reveal a Minnesota jersey with the Minnesota cutout of the front of it, which is peak Jimmy Butler. What you know about Jimmy Butler is that it takes a special type of coach and a special type of culture and a special type of roster to maximize him. Like, you put him on Philadelphia next to Joel Embiid, and he's great because Jimmy and Joel Embiid have the same mindset, win at all costs kind of mindset. Jimmy and Ben Simmons don't have the same mindset. And Jimmy was kind of ahead of the curve on Ben Simmons, kind of knowing that there was something off. He was like, there was something a little bit off with Ben Simmons. But you put him in Miami where Eric Spoelstra, remember that scene late in the season this year where Eric Spoelstra and Jimmy Butler were going to get into each other.
Of course.
And Eric says, "What, you want to fight me now?" That's Jimmy Butler. Like, but you have to have a coach that is willing to kind of brush that off. It's like, whatever. This is what happens. It's intense. Watch us in practice. Like, I think there's 30 teams in the NBA. Jimmy might not be able to play for 28 of them.
No
at least
kidding.
not at this level that he's playing at right now. He is in the perfect situation in Miami with that roster, with that coach, with Bam Adebayo, with the guys down there that play with an edge. And as long as he's playing at this level, you can't count Miami out. I mean, you don't really run plays for Jimmy Butler. Like, Jimmy Butler just takes the ball and he's like, you know what? I'm better than these guys. I'm going to take it at these guys. I'm going to shoot mid-range jumpers on these guys. Like, he just believes wholeheartedly that when he has the ball in his hands, he's better than the guy in front of him.
Last guy that guy across the way wants to see in the Eastern Conference Finals.
I was so happy that the Hawks beat them in the play-in, so they weren't the 7th seed.
Yeah.
To go against the Celtics.
I would not. I mean, everybody kind of attributes the Bucks loss to Giannis' injury, and there's some truth to that. Look, he missed 2.5 games in that series, but
they won one of those games,
right? And they lost, and the Bucks lost all 3 that Giannis played any part in. So I don't know. I can tell you that being around that Boston organization, they got the matchup they wanted in that first round. A little harder than they thought, having to go 6 games, but they got the matchup they wanted. And now, if you ask them, the Celtics right now obviously focused on Philly, but
they want the Knicks.
Yeah, you want the Knicks. You'd much rather play the Knicks if you're the Celtics than have to deal with that Miami team and that coach. I mean, Eric Spoelstra versus Joe Mazzulla it's a tough matchup. Like, Eric Spoelstra's got experience.
Not even close. Like, Spoelstra's so much better. Why doesn't Joe Mazzulla call timeouts?
That was a bad look. And I think Joe even admitted it afterward. But that was a bad look. Overtime, 1 possession, ball in the backcourt. I know you don't want Philadelphia to sub in some more defensive players, but you got to call timeout there. You got to set something up.
And then Tatum just stood there at the top. It was just. And then why is Jaylen Brown doubling off of Harden when he's been torching them all night?
He admitted that was a mistake too. Like, that was a whiff. I don't know that a timeout necessarily helps that, but 15 seconds left, you got to call a timeout and run the play. It makes you wonder, like, does Joe Mazzulla, do the Celtics have confidence that they're going to draw up the kind of play that makes the timeout worth it? Or is it better to just try to catch the Sixers, catch whatever team, backpedaling, not able to set their own defense? Maybe it's a calculation on their part that the way things are moving is better than if you call a timeout and drop your own play.
It just further illustrates that Ime Udoka was the toughest guy on that team.
Ime Udoka got a lot of that team. But look, if Joe Mazzulla wins the series, you got to give him credit for that too.
Yeah, I mean, Brad Stevens was the king of dialing up plays, call timeout, and they would basically at 100% of them.
I like it.
I've got Chris Mannix here. A couple more minutes left for the Sports Illustrated senior writer here. What was it like in Guadalajara, being right there for Canelo Alverez and that whole scene? What was that like?
The best sports atmosphere I've ever been a part of.
Get out of here.
Best, without question. You had 50,000 Guadalajarans and people from the outskirts of the area as well, packed into a soccer stadium. The entrance, the ring walk, the 150-piece mariachi band playing for Canelo Alvarez. Just it was intense in there watching Canelo make that walk to the ring. And I give Canelo Alvarez a lot of credit for doing that. Like, he still made north of $20 million, but he's accustomed to making north of $30 million. He took a pretty significant pay cut to come down to Guadalajara. Ringside tickets for that fight went for like $2,000, which is still pretty expensive for the area. Ringside tickets in Vegas, $18,000, $19,000, something like that. Site fees in Vegas, big money. But he wanted to bring a fight to his hometown. He did it, and I think it was well worth it. Everything about that event was incredible. The fight itself, if you were skeptical of Canelo Alvarez still being the face of boxing, the #1 star in boxing, you probably left feeling pretty good about that, because 3 years ago, Canelo Alvarez knocks out John Ryder, doesn't let him survive that 5th round knockdown. Now, not as great stamina-wise, maybe not as good a finisher as he used to be. Still a top 10 pound-for-pound guy, but I wonder after that fight if we have seen the best days of Canelo Alvarez behind him.
But it was still an incredible scene.
Incredible scene.
We'll never forget it.
Incredible scene.
So I know next up on the fight game is something that you're You give me your itinerary for tonight and where you're going. You were sitting down.
Lakers, this is great.
Yeah.
Lakers tonight.
Yep.
And then there's a 1:30 a.m. flight out of LAX that I'm going to catch.
Why not?
That takes me to Dallas for the Jake Paul, Nate Diaz press conference on Tuesday, which is going to be quite the scene. Is Jake Paul? You guys, we were talking about this before we went on air about, Nate Diaz does that incident he had in New Orleans put the fight in jeopardy. Not this kind of fight. That makes the fight even bigger. Nate Diaz
choking
just randomly choking out some guy.
Okay.
But isn't the lesson learned in that? Like, don't step to Nate Diaz. Like, I don't know how that all happened.
Why
like,
would you ever step to Nate Diaz?
I mean, what are you doing? Like, you have to know who you're stepping to.
I have a feeling alcohol was involved. It's
Bourbon Street?
Yep,
I have a feeling about that. But that only makes that event, I think, a little bit bigger.
Okay. And so how huge is this event going to be?
It's going to be big. It's at American Airlines Center on August 5th.
Yep.
And look at, Jake Paul, people always want to see him now test himself against real boxers. This is why he doesn't do it. Because even if Jake Paul fought a rematch against Tommy Fury, it wouldn't be anywhere near as big as what Jake Paul against Nate Diaz is going to be. Jake Paul against Anderson Silva in Arizona was huge, and mostly because all of Anderson Silva's fans showed up. Jake Paul wasn't the attraction at that point. Anderson Silva was. In Dallas, there are going to be 10,000 plus Nate Diaz fans packing that building. The face-offs are going to be intense. The fight week is going to be intense. Security is probably going to be tripled because of what could happen between these two guys. I'm telling you, when you get to that first week in August, it's oftentimes a dead week in sports, right? NFL training camp just starting to open. Basketball is basically wrapped. The sporting world is going to take notice of Jake Paul against Nate Diaz.
I'll be at the potential polar opposite in terms of intensity event that Pro Football Hall of Fame speeches are that day.
There you go.
I'll be in Canton, Ohio. Paul
some good trash
Diaz,
talk there.
In terms of the intensity of a Paul Diaz fight, and then the intensity of a Joe Klecko acceptance speech. By the way, I say that just because Klecko is the funniest word I could possibly say. Although I'm very excited as a Jet fan to see a member of the Sack Exchange go into the Pro Football Hall of Fame. But that's where I'll be on that day.
I'll send pictures.
Chris, really quick, since we're still on the boxing thing, Haney and Lomachenko's coming up, man. And to me, I mean, I know Paul and Nate is a spectacle, but this is a real fight to me. What are your thoughts on this fight coming up?
Yeah, I was talking to somebody this morning associated with that fight, and he was telling me that a couple of weeks out, Lomachenko is in as good a shape as he's ever been. He is completely locked in for this fight. And I think the big question going into fight week is, how hard is it for Devin Haney to get down to 135 pounds? He is a big 135-pounder. If this Lomachenko fight did not materialize, he would probably be fighting already at 140 pounds. Devin is as disciplined as they come, but he's in his mid-20s now. He's been fighting at 135 pounds for a long time. Mm-hmm. If he is at all diminished going into this fight, at all drained weight-wise, this is a fight for Vasily Lomachenko, even at the backstage, the Canelo stage, if you will, of his career. It's a fight Lomachenko can definitely win.
Okay.
What's next for Ryan Garcia?
I would guess that after Ryan Garcia decides on a new trainer, whether it's a return to Eddie Reynoso, which I think is possible, I think someone like Dean Campos, who used to train my colleague Sergio Mora, is someone that would work well with Ryan Garcia. You're going to see him in at least 2 lower-tier fights. I think Mercito Hesta, throw a name out there. He's someone that beat Jojo Diaz in his last fight. That's a fight that's a safe fight for Ryan Garcia to take before the end of the year. Then one more fight before we start talking about Ryan against any of the big names in the 140-pound division.
Yeah, Tank Davis kind of put him to sleep there.
I think you learn a lot from a fight like that, for sure.
And a perfect person to have here on the show today, talking boxing and NBA playoffs with Chris Mannix. So I guess the final question is, when is Jokic Ishbia 2? When does that happen?
Man, I can tell you, Mat Ishbia is praying right now that Nikola Jokic doesn't get suspended. He does not want any part of being.
Of course not.
And that tweet was perfect. That was exactly what he needed to say. But to put a button on this, there's going to be a lot of conversation today. I'm telling you, a lot of conversation. You cannot put your hands on anyone in the crowd. If it was a regular season game, no question, Nikola Jokic suspended for the next one. But game 5, can the league do it?
They shouldn't do it. I hope they don't do it. And you're right. Ishbia's tweet was perfect. Like, hey, great game last night. That should be front and center. I have nothing but respect for Jokic. Go Suns. It's just like, but Jokic.
What a run for Mat Ishbia. Like, takes over the team, 15 minutes later, trades for Kevin Durant, second round of the playoffs. He's in the stands, literally, physically altercating, if that's a word, with Nikola Jokic.
Look, you're right. The league should just call up Jokic and say, don't touch a fan. And call up Ishbia and say, no more jump balls. Okay.
What helps Jokic?
No held possession anymore.
What helps Jokic is that he doesn't have history of this. Like Draymond, obviously, a lot of history there. So I think that's going to certainly work in Jokic's favor. And if I was in the prediction game, I think whatever punishment is something less than a suspension for Game 5. But there will be people pushing for a suspension.
Here's my answer: Jokic gets fined. And Ishbia's got to sit next to Jokic's brothers at the next Nuggets game in Denver.
You seen video of those guys?
I have.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Those guys don't.
They don't play. That's what I'm saying. That's his punishment. His seat, he's got to sit right in between Jokic's brothers in Denver.
There's tough and there's Serbian tough. Okay? Like, just saying.
I was waiting for his brothers to come bum rush him when that whole thing happened. I was like, where are they at?
That's why you give it. By the way, Ishbia would give up possession.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Thanks for coming in, Chris.
Anytime, Rich.
Catch the Rich Eisen Show every single day on the Roku channel, 12 to 3 Eastern, for free.